Muy buenos días, señoras y señores. Soy Gonzalo Velázquez, líder de comunicaciones de
Good
Celsia.
morning, everyone. I'm Gonzalo Velasquez, communications leader. Would like to welcome you to the financial results for the fourth quarter 2022. Today, we're joined by Ricardo Cel, and Cesar Piedrahita, financial leader of the company. We have two channels for transmission. We have one through Zoom, but we've also reserved, we've saved time for Q&A. The questions will be available in our platform for those who are joining us via Zoom. As we were telling you earlier, we're opening a space channel to see how it works there. And we would like to welcome everyone joining in that platform. This event has in simultaneous interpretation English Spanish. If you're using a computer, you might select the language by choosing or clicking the icon on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. This option is also available in your mobile phones. In both cases, if you do not wish to hear the original audio, select the option mute original audio. We would like to thank everyone joining us today. So now I'm going to give the floor to Ricardo, Celsia's leader. So welcome to Space, to the Zoom, to the webinar, to all these channels that we have to communicate with the people that are interested in Celsia. Good morning, Gonzalo. Thank you all. Thank you to everyone joining us today. Who will be listening to the financial results of the team to close the 2022, which was a great year for us. We had great results, and it will allows us to jump into 2023 on the right foot. So we will be talking about the challenges regarding the regulations, but also in the business, and we hope that everything will work out, and with that capacity to adapt that the company has shown, we will be at the forefront of the market. We start this webinar celebrating, if you can name it that way, because we're celebrating the culmination or the end of the blackout in 93, which was a trauma for a big generation and motivated a big change in the electric sector. Here in Celsia, we were asking many of our younger employees, collaborators, team members, and most of the people didn't know what the blackouts between 92 and 93 were. And this was really traumatic because it was 11 months of around only 9 hours of power of blackouts in the country. And you can picture this today, it would be something catastrophic. And from this situation, under the Constitution of 1991, the country started to restructure and reformulating the electric sector with two very important laws, which were 142 and 143 bills that created this solid institutionality that for 30 years has allowed an incredible development of the electric sector, of the Colombian electric sector, which we can say that nowadays, in terms of quality and price, is the best in Latin America. And we will be talking about that in a bit. This is a system that after 30 years has been extremely reliable. Additionally, it has a solidarity scheme of subsidies between high and low income. Let's remember that the higher income levels provide subsidies for the lower income. The only income level that doesn't have a subsidy and contribution is the fourth level. And there's an additional schema, which is the distribution areas between the cities and the rural areas. And it allows that the distribution of the DRGs can be supported for many clients, and it's a type of subsidy so that the cities can subsidize energy in the rural areas, which is something extremely important. Additionally, after that crisis in 1992, the sector started an economic recovery. So 30 years ago, this sector was 100% public and managed by the public institutions under political criteria, and it had no notions of development. And nowadays, this sector is adding more than 7 trillion pesos to the country, and it's a public-private model with alliances that has allowed to provide and generate electric matrix and energetic matrix that it's a role model around the world. Most people don't know that the Colombian matrix is the fifth cleanest energetic matrix in the world. So when we're talking about uh, um, energetic transformation, we should stop talking about that here because we are already there. We also have important challenges. The decree 02/27, in which the president of the republic takes the general hold of the CREG, which is the Regulation Commission, and they expedited the administrative act. At the date, we don't have the regulatory disposition that develop or modify the current regulation on the matter. And on this point, we would like to make a call, which is let's strengthen institutionality, because this institutionality was created 30 years ago and it's been evolving really well. It has allowed us to overcome 5 critical drought and rain spells of El Nino without any blackouts. We have also overcome a black part of the history of the country in which the guerrilla groups were bringing down power towers, and there was no one single blackout. All that institutionality has allowed us to increase the coverage, and today we've reached to go from 74% to 98% in 30 years, and the quality index are better every day. Even when you look at the graphs in which we analyze the price in USD of the medium income levels compared to the rest of America, and you compare it to the quality of the system, the countries that have a lower tariff or a lower rate than Colombia, they have a completely deficient matrix or grid. So Venezuela are completely deficient. This is really interesting. And when you look at the rates, the minimum wage 30 years ago would buy 20% less kilowatts of what the minimum wage can purchase today. This means that we nowadays with the minimum wage, you can buy a lot, or we're buying a lot more kilowatts. So we will see how this moves out through the different guilds, the different sectors we're participating, and we'll be really aware on what implications this will bring to the sector, especially to our company. Now let's jump to talk about 2 other topics that I'm quite sure that you're really interested on, which is the board of directors announcements. We're announcing the retribution to investors, the return to investors. So yesterday we published the utility distribution proposal. We will be bringing them to the stakeholders meeting. And it's important to mention that in previous years, the company was providing an ordinary and an extraordinary dividend. This yield, we were giving it with the reflection of non-recurrent transactions. In this project of utility distribution, we're going to propose to the assembly of 283 pesos. This is an increment of 11.9% compared to last year, and we will be paying it in 4 quotes, in four parts. This year, we're providing 110% of the controller utility of 2022, and for this, we will be taking from the reserves, and we were doing this out of consideration that our stakeholders or shareholders, we know that this support that they've provided has been really important and that have always motivated to continue this transformation progress. We want to give them this recognition that is relevant. In 2017, the consolidated EBITDA was about 1.12 billion, and today we're closing 2022 with an EBITDA of 1.8 billion. Additionally, we have 200 million through platforms that is not consolidated. This means that the operation has practically doubled, and at the same time we've been able to hold the leverage index stable at around 3 times the EBITDA. This means that our AAA rating is still there, and we've been able to increase the EBITDA volume. Additionally, the results providing good dividends with the shareholders. Now, regarding the lack of cash flow in the market that we're experiencing, that has been hitting the prices of our shares, we wanted to mention that we have the reacquisition of shares program that we wanted to be proposed in the next meeting, the shareholder meetings in March. The goal is to reacquire 3 billion that will be done throughout the next 3 years. If we're going to take 3 years to use the 3 billion, the idea is to quickly deploy the resources that are needed to give floor to this or to give support to this in the market. The reacquisition of companies in the market share is really important. The first mechanism is through the transactional procedures in the market, so we can reacquire a maximum of 25% of the daily average volume of the last 90 sessions. The price of buying must be same or lower than the same of the demand for the system transaction, which is the norm. And the maximum amount of shares of the program we can reacquire through this mechanism is up to 10% of the shares that are circulating. So this takes us that the amount of 3 billions is the one that was used to considering this situation. This transactional system is a very good alternative, but we are also aware, and a lot of analysts and investors have mentioned this, that the problem in the market is the lack of cash flow, and that 25% is relatively low. This is only 70 millions approximately daily. However, we think that it will support, it would give enough cash flow, and we hope that it will consolidate at least a price that is going to be reasonable for those shareholders that have the need of selling for any reason. But let's look at another mechanism. The other mechanism is the independent one. This implies that the reacquisition would be done through the share market, but it would be different from the usual business round procedures. In this case, we will follow the rules of the programs of reacquisition approved by the society without having inherent limit to the transactional system. In this case, we would do a public bidding to reacquire shares, and we would establish an amount and a price. Operationally, this mechanism works as an OPA, but with very different time frame as OPA, and there is no freeze in the prices. It has very substantial difference, so it's a very fast mechanism, and it's more or less 5 days after you release the fold, and we think it's really quick, and we believe that by combining the two mechanisms we will be addressing this or we will be seeing an exit to the situation or overcoming the situation, and it will provide a solution to those shareholders who need to sell. Obviously, you're asking us the fundamental value that we're seeing, and what we're doing here is we're simply creating a support mechanism for the cash flow for those processes that I was mentioning. So in the ruling that we will be proposing, we will have the two mechanism. So the board of directors and all the management team are working in operations that will allow to reveal and capture the value of the businesses that the organization has. However, we understand that the need for this cash flow for in the short term for some of the shareholders is limiting, and we're trying to offer a mechanism that will allow us to overcome these limitations that the market experience. Now, jumping to other subjects, during the Q&A, we will be able to go deeper into that. We have Esteban Piedradita and Santiago Arango, and we will be able to answer any questions that you might have. Regarding the behavior of the rates, of the energy rates, I would like to tell you that we stick to the guidelines of the national government, and we also participated with other companies of the sector in that bidding to build solutions and a framework for this rate. So Celsia clients in Cauca and Tolima experienced a reduction in the rates in the tariff in the months of November and December 2022. With the accumulated reduction in this moment, the rate dropped from between 2.5 and 8%. And as generated, Celsia did a reduction average to 9% compared to the business partners that have energy contracts, energy sales contracts. So we complied with all the regulations that were given, and this gives a lot of stability to the indicators that we're having or an abnormal behavior due to the commodities and supply chain issues that were generating a lot of pressure. On the other hand, the company also took all the necessary actions to incorporate Tolima area in the ADD. And we were able to bridge this gap because it was the only department in the country that didn't have or didn't participate in this schema. And second, we were able to reduce the cost of distribution. So we have to remember that the institutionality and the clear rules for the game are the ones that have allowed us to do investments that continue strengthening the system. Nowadays, we bring energy or we provide power to more than 1.2 million clients between homes and companies. We invested around 5 billion pesos between new grids, new substation, new circuits in the system to improve reliability. In Tolima, it was 143 billion, and in Valle del Cauca were 357 billion. All of this to increase the quality of our service. In the SAIDA indicator, which measures the quality of the service, registered in Celsia 10.29 hours in Valle del Cauca and 40.79 hours in Tolima, improving substantially what we were providing before. And the SAIFI that measures the frequency shows us that the interruptions was 6.6 times in the Valle and 19.9 times in Tolima. This is really important in terms of quality. When we look at it at the main cities level, the 5 main cities in Tolima, the improvement is very relevant. Another important indicator in which we're working on to bridge the gap between the two departments is in energy loss. In Valle, it was 9.4%, a little bit above technical losses, and in Tolima was 12.9%. And we were previously was around 27%. So we've improved a lot. Sorry, 20%. So we've improved almost 7%. We conducted maintenance and service plans that include coordination with the control center. We're seeking to minimize displacement time, the availability of material, and we're incorporating the use of drones to ensure the integrity of the operation. There are a lot of many other investments to achieve more coverage and to increase in the transition in the energetic transition. One thing you might know is we created a startup that's called Enerbit. It's a technology company focused on the client and whose main uh, product is trading energy. It's completely innovative. The strategic aim is to digitalize electricity and power to give the power of decision to our clients. We're obsessed with reducing the cost of service for each client to provide new payment methods, new methods. We've developed hardware, software. We have it's a completely independent company from Celsia, but it has all the support and it's being led by experts that we've brought from all around to increase the value proposal of Energy. So you will be hearing a lot about Energy in this year. We started operation with this company as a market agent in 2022 in April, and we closed with 1,157 clients. We're already in 4 markets in Cartagena, Palmira, Medellin, and Pereira. And this client base makes Enerbit as the fifth pure trader in the country and is the second in terms of digital traders. There's another important front in electric vehicles. We close with over 1,500 charging stations between private, public, residential in several departments and cities in the country. This electric vehicle topic is strengthening every day. We're generating partnerships and we see a potential line for growth, seeing what's happening all around the world. Now, in internet, in home, in internet services, we've been developing for over 3 years. We have over 46,000 clients in Valle del Cauca and Tolima, and I think by today, we're over 550,000 clients with our optic fiber system and an availability of 99.99%. This means it's a really, really good service. Basically, the availability is just the design is really good. The experience index is around 83.7%, and this is incredible. In telecommunications, the experience index it's really bad, and we have a experience index that it's extraordinary because it's a company that was designed from 100% digital and provides the best quality internet service in the country. We're in rural areas, we're in the cities, and there's something really beautiful thing here happening. Whatever it is that we pass the optic fiber and we run into a school, we automatically connect the school. And we have 124 schools that have connectivity, and it's almost 80,000 students. For each public school that we go through in Tolima and Valle del Cauca are going to have really good internet service so that they can be connected. So as you can see in this company, we wanted to mention or include this new topic so that you can see the capacity of Celsia to find a new horizon, develop new ideas. There are new ideas that we're assessing, that we're considering, that in the future we will be talking about that. But we're always willing to adapt and to generate new things. Now with that, we will be talking more about the financial results. Yeah, thank you, Ricardo. And I would like to greet everyone joining us as we always do it in the website. In the shareholders website, you can find the details of the report that we published yesterday and additional information that you can also see in the site, the same as in the links. And now I'm going to do something a little bit different from what I normally do. We want to focus on a certain important events that happened during the semester before we jump into figures. First, I would like to tell you that we did the second sale of debt to the BID as a way to accelerate the collection of that debt. That is really important. That it was 183 billion pesos. This made us to do an assessment of said operation and has a net effect of 21 billion pesos. However, that value of 21 billion is represented in 4 different accounts. First, we have financial income for 31 million linked to the assessment of the interest of that tariff rate under the regulation framework. Second, we have a financial expense of 64 billion. Third, we have a fiscal shield where we saw a difference of 22 billion. And finally, we have a deferred tax for 11 billion. This operation represents the sale of debt for a rate of around 12% when the financial options, the most competitive in the short term, were giving interest of only 18%. This is due to the IDB support when we started the program, but it also reflects the regulatory stability that allows for these entities to provide these options. Second, we had an asset sales, the sale of assets in Caoban Laurel, given that we're the managers and developer of those platforms, for a total of 380 billions. That generated utilities after tax of 46 billion. However, given that Caoba and Laurel are related entities to the fact that the company has 50% share of those vehicles, the accounting regulation allows us to reflect 36 billions of that as a lower value of the investment and only 15 billion in the ERI. Finally, as an extraordinary event, and it's normal that in the final quarter of the year we do all the provisions that we must have. And this year we register 52 billions that basically come from 2 assets. First, Porvenir 2 asset, where we register a detriment of 31 billion. But we also had a detriment in the liquidation in the trust fund of the BLM for 21 billion. The non-recurrent transactions of the quarter, I'm not including the asset sales, particularly when we talked about the sale of La Senda and the provision that we conducted. The net consolidated income were 13.2 billion. And additionally, we had a loss due to the controller of 19 billion. When depurating the non-recurrent transactions, the net consolidated earning in the 4th quarter would be of almost 73.7 billion pesos, and it would not longer be a loss but income of 135 billion. In 2021, we also had really important operations when we depurated them. That's almost 100 billion pesos, and the comparable data would be for the 74 billion that I told you. And in the controller, the result would be 113 billion after depurating the 2021 operations with the 43 billion that I just mentioned. These exceptional movements have an effect on the quarter and do not set a trend on the operation of the company. Additionally, it's important to remember that in this last quarter, in the Central America operations, where we were out of operation for the whole quarter, and due to exceptional events that happened, the Rilo in Panama generated a lack of power for 3 months. and that's around 10 million or so less of income in Central America. In the fourth quarter, the consolidated income added to 1.76 trillion. So it's a 46% growth compared to the previous year. In Colombia, the income were boosted by a more generation, commercialization, both in contracts and on the spot, as well as use and grid connections or network connection. Given that there's new infrastructure in operation. In Central America, there were decrease in 13.9% due to the decrease in generation due to the events of ST that I mentioned. The sales cost were 1.3 trillions. That's an increment of 60.3% compared to years. The variable cost were 1.1 trillion, and they increased 82.5% related to the increase of purchases of assets. The fixed cost added to 291 billion with an increase of 12%, an increase due to operation, maintenance, tax, and rent. In 2022, the cost of sales reached 3.87 trillion, registering a growth of 36.9%. The administrative cost reached 108 billion. It was an increase of 20%, mainly to the debt provision of 24 billion. If we excluded the effect of this, the quarter, the administrative cost for the quarter would be 83.4 billion, with a decrease of 7.4% due to the policy of conscious saving that was implemented in the last quarter. The EBITDA in the quarter was of 444 billion, with an increase of 10.3% due to a contribution margin that was positive in all the segments, including the investment platforms and a more quantity of infrastructure that became available to our clients. In 2022, the consolidated EBITDA reached 1.78 trillion with an increase of 30.1% and an EBITDA margin of 32%. Now, the financial costs that were really important in the quarter were around 257 billion, again registering 166 reduction compared to the same year previously, which were mainly supported by the IDB operation and support that I was talking earlier. There was an increase of the indicators in the last year, so it's important that you're aware that the effective rate of the last quarter or the last quarter of 2021 was around 8%, and the debt index and interest of the last quarter of 2022, due to this effect of the indicators, was around 16%. The income tax were around 81 billion. This was an increase of 105% due to the increase in the nominal rate of taxes. And it's a growth of around 65.5% compared to previous year. In the net consolidated earnings added to 442 billion, and the net attributable to owners of the controller were 276 billion. Now jumping to we have a indicator of leverage of 3 times of the EBITDA. The average lifespan of the company is 5.67 years. And at the beginning of this year, we set some really important transactions to reprofile the end terms that we had for this year. We were able to resettle 820 billion, and these were divided in terms between 2 and 5 years, including the ordinary bonds for the second market of around 242 billion for January. We closed the company with a consolidated box of 324 billions. I would like to highlight additionally that in terms of debt, we achieved one of the most important goals that we had, which was basically that our global debt between the third and the fourth quarter would be exactly the same. So we had a little in debt at the beginning of the year, but the global debt of the organization didn't move between the close of the third quarter and the fourth quarter. And that continues to be our goal. I would like to point out before I finish this portion of the webinar, the deployment or the importance of the platforms out of which we are co-investors, and we provided the operation and maintenance and the execution of projects. Caoba closed with incomes of around 224 billions with a growth of 23.7% and a EBITDA that is close to 195 billion, which was a growth of 25%. On the other side, the large-scale solar energy, which is C2 energy platform, we closed with incomes of 26 billions and an EBITDA of 20 billion pesos. Laurel, which is our solar platform at a lower scale, smaller scale, closed with 3.3 billions and an EBITDA of 1.06 billions. And finally, and we've talked about this a lot, Tesorito, we had incomes since its start of operation of around 39 billion and an EBITDA of 31 billion. With this, Richard, we close the analysis of financial figures, which was a lot, but because it was a closing quarter, it was really good. It reflects a really good performance of the organization. Thank you. So yeah, these were really outstanding numbers and figures. Even when we're talking the last part of those platforms, we can see that one of those platforms started from zero, and nowadays it has a EBITDA of 31 billion. So the solar is gaining a lot of traction. So it's really interesting to see how all these sectors are evolving, and how is it that we are growing in all of these sides. However, none of all that are listening doesn't understand the challenges that we're facing, not only from the regulation side, because that's an important challenge, but that macroeconomy subjects and topics. So it's really hard. Those interest rates that you're starting to feel, all of this starts to wear or start to hit. And because we have a capex and we're trying to import, and the exchange rates are really hitting really hard. With all that combination, we're starting simplification programs, automatization programs. Last year, we were internally calling them conscious saving, and we were able to reduce and increase the efficiency of our operation, to reduce cost and improve efficiency. We were calling it the TOTEX, which is the recurring capex, and other indicators was growing around 6-7%. So in reality, we were decreasing really important figures. Additionally, the capex for expansion investment, we took really strong measures. So due to all of this exchange rates and all of this, obviously the rules to jump into an expansion capex is to change, is to make adjustment. So our partners, for instance, the platforms, the risk in the country have increased. That's normal. That's something natural. In face of the global instability and the mistrust in investment, we're all waiting for that. And we must have new requirements, new conditions, but also to have a financial closure that, with all this combination, allows us to present to the clients expansion projects to our board to assess if they're available. Because this new situation that we're facing is really new, but our capex is really having an impact. And the recurring capex, it's important to continue really important development to be able to comply with the regulations, the minimum regulations in that sense. So with that combination, we're dealing with that for a year. Now, in terms of profitability in the company, and we're going to close with this, by the end of 2022, or the end of 2022, showed us that we still have a positive differential of 131 PB compared to the WACC and the profitability that we have. Today, we have a profitability of 14.33%, and our WACC, it's in 13.02%. So it's a difference of 8% compared to the previous years. This means that the increase in capital cost or in trust cost is big, but it's not just for us, it's for any company in Colombia. And we also saw an impact from the situation in Central America that clearly, if we were to take this out, we would have a difference of 200 basic points between WACC and ROC. This allows us to say that we are healthy, that we're good, that we have a company that has been able to overcome all these adverse situations. But to close, to put the cherry on top, now in terms of actions for taxes, for instance, in terms of infrastructure, we were approved of 70 billion pesos for national projects, 3 in terms of roads, 7 for education, and 1 environment. We had an impact on 16 municipalities over 5 departments that were highly vulnerable in Colombia. And we've executed since 2017 more than 100 billion. This means that we're reaching more than 110,000 people in 27 different municipalities in the country. And we were able to have approval of 43 billion for projects in Valle, Antioquia, and Cauca. And we're really happy with this because now, talking to people, there are people who are going to ask us if we're going to approve the donation to the foundation, and we will take this proposition to our shareholders. And I think this will hold, but we're providing over 220 billion pesos. And we're executing our projects for our communities, and around the year we have 7 billion pesos that we donate to the population. So the impact of this program for us is huge. And I think we can close here. Gonza, Santiago, Esteban, and we're ready to answer any questions that we have for the shareholders and the investors. All right. So yeah. So we have 202 people attending in Zoom, and we're also broadcasting the event through live space in Twitter, and we have around 100 people connected there. It's a format that is not specifically designed for Twitter, but we thought that would be very valid for everyone to be able to connect through that channel. So thank you for joining, for attending to this invitation. We have a lot of questions to Ricardo, Esteban, Santiago. Juan Pulgarin has a couple of comments. A lot of people were asking how important it is to do this, to mention the blackouts that happened 30 years ago and all the transformation, because most of the times we just focus, we don't see the whole picture, the landscape of where we started, how is it that we're changing. Juan Pulgarin is asking, in 2021, the CPI was 5.62 and dividends was 200T. In 2022, the CPI was 13.2 and the dividends was 309. Do you think that the dividend that was announced for 2023 will affect the drop of the shares? I don't know what, and also the impact in the sales and buying of shares. Yes, we were doing the total recount of the dividend, and it's important to consider something that's very important. In 2020, we started a process of an extraordinary dividend. We presented to the assembly as a process of sharing a very important transaction that occurred in 2019. Was the Termoflores asset, if you remember. In 2015, 2016, it took a lot of effort. It was the first time that we proposed a dividend, and we had a lot of let's say, monitoring from our shareholders. Then, after the sales of Flores, we also had an extraordinary dividend that the idea was to make it something, a one-time event, and we conducted an extraordinary event or process, if you will, and we started reducing it, and this year that process comes to an end. The ordinary dividend that nowadays represent the total of the distribution of utilities of earnings that is being proposed to the assembly corresponds to an increment of 15% in the dividends of ordinary per action that is being distributed to the shareholders. So we jump from 252 pesos per share, and now we're in 283 pesos per share, ordinary. On the contrary, we think that the ordinary is complementary to the process of what we announced, with a very important part to reimburse our shareholders with the support that for the support that they've had. So more than seeing it in a negative light, is understanding that the extraordinary is over, but the ordinary has increased a lot. And to elaborate on that, two things. The first is that the GLID is really, we're setting an increase for any first-time shareholder, anyone who's jumping on board. And we consider that this is really interesting. We think that we're going through a very complex situation. We have 17,000 shareholders. Most of them are small shareholders with less than 20 millions of investment per share. So with these programs that we're presenting, we will be able to help a lot to the liquidity that a lot of people need. It's something that we've seen in the last 3 months. So thank you, Gonzalo. And thank you, Juan Fernando, for the question. There's another question from Juan Fernando that comes via Zoom. To all of those that are attending through Twitter, that's an alternate channel. So if you have any question, we're answering only questions from Zoom. And Juan Fernando is also asking, the new shares from Ecopetrol, Ecopetrol strategies in terms of generating, what are the risks in the management and outcomes of Celsia? Ecopetrol, let's say, it's been giving the possibility to develop within the National Development Plan, and they have the option to jump into the generation market, and they're being given a priority in terms of solar and wind power. Here, it's in Colombia, vertical integration is not allowed. Only 3 companies have the option to do this because we were integrated way before this law come into effect. And yeah, and if you allow me to jump there, within the National Development Plan, Ecopetrol can jump in and start participating in the 4 sectors if the generation comes from renewable, non-conventional sources. Only if that happens. They can integrate as long as the sources are from those, are like those. The vertical integration would only be allowed for those companies that were consolidated before the law jumped into action. And a lot of people are asking it, how can we lower the rates? We can only lower the rates by having more competition, by expanding the market. If Ecopetrol has the option, can do it, yes, it's more than welcome, as long as they don't start doing dumping and just doing projects yeah, with really, let's say, strange maneuvers because it's a public entity. But we believe that more competition, more competitiveness, bringing more investors in the aeolic and the wind power and solar power. If we bring more, there are a lot of investors coming from from around the world, from very important markets that want to invest there. So this is going to benefit all of the clients and consumers in the country. That's basically it. Thank you, Ricardo. Santiago, another question from Juan Pulgarin. Enerbit, that was mentioned during this presentation. Is it what happens with the Enerbit? Yeah, we have this digital trader for several years, and we were able to jump into market or to launch last year. This has a very special configuration because it can offer products that are really different from the ones that the traditional traders can offer. So additionally, we develop a hardware with some startups from Cali and with our innovation R&D team from Enerbit that allows us not only to, let's say, use a smart measuring device, but have another device that allows us to have an interrelationship with the clients that is really interesting, is really key. So it's a trader that has its partner, it has its differential, and we hope that will go beyond energy and more into interaction with clients and customers. And we hope that in the future you will become customers for Enerbit if you're in one of the cities that we mentioned, because we're going to expand in this year. We hope that you do. There's a comment from Elena. She's really happy about this news of the optic fiber connection in schools. She's really happy with that. Now, in the repurchase, do you have the times, the estimated times? No, we will jump to the assembly. We have the shareholders meeting. We will hope for approval, and we will be working diligently. We're already developing a plan so that we can do it in as short time as possible and operating with either of the mechanisms that we mentioned. We have the 300 billions. If we require that for this year, then we will use it this year. But it's according to what our shareholders request from us. So we're being very active in the execution of that mandate of that asset. Now, due to the tax shield and given the new regulations, is Celsia be reducing the investment? Yeah, unfortunately, yes. I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to ask Esteban to provide the scenario. How is it the law that 1715 almost give us an incentive of around 300 basic points? Now with this new tax reform and this new development, they practically eliminate it. So Esteban, if you can tell us a little bit about that. Yeah, as Juan was mentioning in his question, with the tax reform, the minimum tributation rate that was done, we had a big impact in the renewables and everything regarding the transition, energetic transition, such as green hydrogen that was affected there, and a lot of different things. So now we cannot reach those 0% rates that were the law, the 15, that law was was proposing or doing, but now we're subject to that minimum rate of 15%. In our estimates, that represents of around half of what the 1715 was conceived as. Now, we're looking at the scenario that between those two, it would be between 1 to 6. Sorry, the scale was moved. So imagine now for solar and wind power projects, there was a contribution of around 1% of net sales to 6%. It was a jump, so that was a hard hit. Yeah, they doubled the minimum profitability rate. So with this energetic transition, that there is two additional laws, two additional bills that just render almost useless that one. So what do we do to adapt? The only thing that we have to do is, in order to be able to earn back that profitability, is to reduce the cost and capex, and we all know that that's really difficult because it's just by increasing the price. It's not that the projects just dropped, but they're going to be more expensive for the client. So the kilowatt from the renewable source is going to be higher, and also it hurts the other projects such as batteries, storage, and green hydrogen. That, yeah, so basically what they did is they just brought down all the efforts and everything that had been, all the progress that had been achieved with the 1715. I think that Juan's question shed a light in what's the tax provision of rent for this year. It was 287 billions that Celsia Colombia provided as a payment for taxes, which is a little more than the 60% increase compared to the average tax that we paid. This year, we're going to pay 287 billion. So it's a tax machinery that was really important there. So it's an explanation to the 300 megawatts that this year we had. So we're sending a message to the government that's, look, you have to take care of this company because we're really important, because it's a lot of money that we're providing in taxes. Another that's really important in shares repurchase, how is that going to be financed? That repurchase of shares. It's a very good question. And at this moment, we're conducting all the exercise. What I'm telling you is that in our main plan, we're not going to be using the debt. So within our main plan, using debt, or we're doing an assessment of our cash flow of the year, of the different sources that we have in Colombia, of all the operations in Central America, so that we can basically do very efficiently the repurchase of shares without generating big trauma in the company. That's why we can tell you we had a closures at we end up with 343 billion of consolidated, and through that cash flow we can facilitate that operation. But our main goal is that reacquisition is not going to come from debt, even if in the short term we use the debt. but in the picture, we're not. That's our stance. We have 108 people connected in Twitter, 200, almost 200 in Zoom. So is there anything from Bahía Las Minas? Yeah, and Porvenir 2, yes, this in Porvenir 2, our investment there has two parts, one in the assets and the other one in debt. In the assets, we have a remnant value of 122 billion, which is the same as the debt, which is, yeah, basically the same figure. So why do I give you these two numbers, these two figures? So we don't have any patrimony in the project. This doesn't mean that the asset is completely zero. It means that the assets and the debts are the same. In the trust fund, it's the same. We have a really important cash flow generation in that trust fund. And what we had was a detriment due to cautionary accounting, due to the volatility and the change in prices of the metals and all that. With the trust fund, we were wanted to recover that, but we still have a value and we have an expectation of recovering cash flow with those assets. Now we're going to give the floor to the people that are raising the hand in Zoom. So please, Roberto Paniagua, you can open your mic now and do your question. Can you hear me? Yes, Roberto, we can hear you. Yes, Roberto, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Sí, Roberto, te estamos escuchando. Te escuchamos, Roberto.
Roberto, we can hear you. Roberto, go ahead. We can hear you. Can you hear us? No. He's not.
También está Caterina Ortiz en turno para hacer su intervención.
We also have Catherine Ortiz. So Catherine, go ahead.
Buenos días a todos. ¿Me escuchan bien?
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear us?
Muchas gracias.
So, good morning. Thank you. I think that Roberto, yeah, he's having some issues. Go ahead, Catherine, go ahead. Well, I know that at the beginning, Ricardo did a very comprehensive introduction regarding everything on the rates, tariff, the CREG, the blackout, but I would like to know, and on being aware that we still don't have clarity on what the president of the republic wants to do by having the role of the CREG. I don't know if you have been able to analyze the legal aspect of that decision and the scope of it, and how far can he come, and if there is any limit to the changes that he might do, because the big worry is what's the impact on the finances of the companies that nowadays are exposed throughout the chain. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is to understand if the superintendent of public utilities have come out and done some press releases that what they're going to be doing is an indexer so that the rates are not going to vary. But I would like to know if you have had a discussion already there with them, and if you have any, if there's anything that you can share on that, on those declarations from the superintendent. Thank you, Catherine. And I'm going to answer the second question, and we have Santiago Arando to shed some light on the legal side of, on the legal aspects of it. Now, regarding the declaration of the superintendent, these are press releases to the media. There has not been a formal meeting of the different sectors with the superintendent. I think that there are some meetings that are being scheduled to understand what they're thinking on. What, and I'm going to tell you about the indicator index, about the index. Everything was what the PPI, not the CPI, which historically the PPI has been historically has benefited the consumers. And in the last year, they had really significant changes, and the curves have dropped really fast. And possibly in a couple of months, they will go back into that, into the historic trends and into certain stability of the PPI compared to the CPI. And there's the debate if they're going to generate an index that's for the market that's extremely complex. We believe that the PPI was an index that was really stable, really well managed, that allowed to keep the financial level of all the sector. That's, and of all the sector from public and private side. And just to keep it brief, we still haven't talked. So Santiago, if you can tell us a little bit about the legal aspect. Yeah, Catherine, I try to be not too technical and to be really brief. And when I tell you that there are 3 lawyers, that means that there are 10 different interpretations. Now, what the decree that we have today is that the president in the 1370 article, sorry, 370, is that the president can take the role of the administration and the efficiency of the utility. So in this sense, the president took hold of the function that the CRED had allowed them to have a final word in the policies. So what are we saying today? That the 370 article of the Constitution provide the law to the congressmen or the legislators so that they can fix through law, specifically 143, all the capabilities in terms of rates. So today we think that the president can perfectly have the general competence or the general role, but in terms of specific decrees that talk the regime, then there's where we think that cannot be done because it was the law of the legislative through the 143 law that delegated those faculties in the CREG, in the commission, which is what you can see from what you've heard from different aspects, specifically professors from the academy that have talked about it. So we're waiting to see the decree and waiting to assess. But so far, nothing has been defined. And a final question related to all of this. Does this change the expectations of future investment in Celsia? Have you had any revisions on the investment plans? Or are you waiting to see what happens to make a decision on investment regarding what we have for the future? Yeah, undoubtedly, Catherine, this will totally have an impact on the investment. Currently, we're being very prudent. So let's do a 2 capex. We have the recurrent capex, and this will, we want to comply with the quality and the requirements. On the other hand, the expansion CapEx has the different set of rules of profitability and expectations that have completely been adjusted to the new cost of the country, the new regulatory risks, and based on that, and even so, we're on hold, we're on standby waiting to see what's going to happen in these coming months. So what are the proposals for the change of regulation? And additionally, we have the financial aspect of it, Esteban. To each project, that before we start the project, we must have the security. Now, in terms of energetic transition of the CapEx, the amount of connections that we were projecting haven't occurred. So this is also having an impact on the CapEx. That for this year was going to be really strong in the wind power, in the solar power. And all of this is having an impact on the CapEx. So yeah, we're being really prudent, taking care of the money of our shareholders and investors, because we still have uncertainty in the regulatory changes that are coming. So we're being really prudent. We're waiting and we're talking to the government so that they can provide some reliability and some trust for the investors, because Colombia, every year, we need around 2 Hidroitango machines that are coming in to cover the demand. So each of these three, because Colombia is growing a lot. So we need signs of trust so that we can hold this. So thank you, Catherine, for your question. Well, thank you to all of you. And there were a lot of questions with the CapEx, regarding CapEx. There's a question from Jorge Estrada. He's saying, I don't really understand the dividends. Are you going to do a proposal of distribution of ordinary dividend for 283 pesos per share? And that extraordinary dividend would be used for repurchase of shares. No, it's not like that. The extraordinary dividend that we had the last 2 years stops. They culminated, they ended. And this year, we're going to have a new mechanism, which is the reacquisition of shares. But what we have is the ordinary dividend that closes at, or that is going to be 283 pesos. And the extraordinary dividend, it stops because it came to an end. It was conceived and they finished. Roberto Paniagua, let's see if you can hear us now.
Buenos días. Tengo 3 preguntas que ya había dejado.
Good morning. I have 3 questions. The first is, can you give us any information on CapEx guideline? We're having audio difficulties. We'll come back once the audio is reestablished.
Quiero saber ustedes qué planes tienen para reducir ese riesgo país en Colombia, que mínimo va a estar por 4 años. Muchas gracias.
Bueno, voy a tomar una primera parte de tu pregunta.
I'm going to answer one of your questions, because so regarding the indexes, the strategy of the organization is to always have a debt that reflects the index that reflect the incomes. That's why it's tied to the CPI. If you measure the impact of the investment on the cost and the income, there's no need to continue with the correlation of the two index, the CPI in depth, because there's a better way to correlate with what's happening with the income of the company. We didn't have estimated guidance to share. We already shared some insight on the CAPEX. But now regarding the EBITDA, we're not seeing extreme growth or significant growth in EBITDA, but it's seeing small growth. It's still important to remind you all that we're still under the project of the Pacto, and this will have an impact. And we're obviously waiting on 2023. We're expecting a big change in the generation. If we don't have a guidance in terms of EBITDA, we're expecting growth a little bit smaller than for those indicators than last year. And there's a question here. If we were to reduce the rates, the tariffs, what would happen? And I want to share some thought here, and it's the capacity of Celsia for adapting. And I think this is really important. Look, what are we doing today? What we're doing today, or we are in what we can control today. So today, our teams, all of our different teams are looking into ways in which we can reduce operation costs, incorporating technology, new protocols, so that we can uphold our standards or quality standards, but with a reduction in consumption. So what are we doing? We're changing the patterns, we implement technologies. You know that 30-40% of our maintenance tasks has to do with maintenance, and in Tolima we've been conducting really interesting pilots with different strategies, with early identification of damage, and we have all of our teams. So we're doing a little bit of everything. And we're going to congresses, we're looking into new technologies, we're trying to understand what's happening around the world. And this applies to NRV, to energy, to internet, to all of our business lines. So just to answer a little bit. And the other one is the geographic diversification. Yeah, we have a low geographical diversification, but it's really complex to expand due to the exchange rate of the currency exchange rate. It's really hard to do non-organic transitions due to this. And we're in a very regulated environment. How is it that we can jump into a world or an environment that is not that regulated? We have a lot of B2B transactions. Solar is a lot of B2B. We have energetic license, which is a lot of B2B. Retail that we have for our customers that are reaching figures of 40, 50 billion sales a year. So we're jumping into new business lines that allows us to use the expertise, the capacity of Celsia to develop business, to find investors, to develop a market, so that we can provide that diversification in Colombia. But it's clearly more difficult to diversify outside of Colombia. So that might be a little bit beyond what we're capable of. So we have some questions from repurchase. So I think it's important to unify them. One is saying that if you're not worried that after the purchase, the liquidity is going to be lower, why is it that you're not launching an OPA? Jose Carlos Real is saying what percentage of shares is the company planning to repurchase? Also, if you were planning a reacquisition.
Perfecto, yo creo que fuimos.
Yeah, I think that we did a lot of emphasis, and we had the goal to provide action to those minority shareholders that are not finding liquidity that are relatively small. So that's the main goal. The 300 billion, basically, it's close, but it might vary. The other questions, let's say, I don't know if Esteban wants to complement, but yeah, that's basically the goal, just to provide liquidity for those small shareholders. A question that I saw is what were we going to do with the shares that were repurchased? So this will be out of regulation for a bit, and they will not be part of the deciding quorum or for the a profits allocation. So basically, we will do what's under the regulation, under the code. So yeah, so far we will just, we're just in the phase of reacquiring. Thank you, Santiago. Now we're going to give the floor to Sebastián Gallego from Ashmore. Go ahead, Sebastián. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for the presentation. On my side, I have 3 questions. In the regulatory front, are we expecting that President Petro will do an extension of the decree for the 3 initial months that he has said, or what are the expectations there?
También se pueden hacer modificaciones, esperan ustedes, de la ley 142 y 143.
And what are the modifications of the law that you're expecting? The second question is,
de lo cual no se ha hablado.
And I want to ask you about something that hasn't been talked, is the expectations of the El Niño phenomenon. What are your expectations on that side? And the third question is, in terms of reacquisition, is the debt cost that Esteban mentioned was around 16%. What's the logic that you internally have so that the buyback or the reacquisition is a better financial option compared to, let's say, have a prepaid debt, especially the I-17, that unfortunately you haven't really met the debt metrics. So you had a budget under 5 trillions. Today we're in over 5.5 trillion. So what's the financial logic behind that? Thank you. Yeah, Sebastian, those are really good questions. So let's start with the first one, with regulation and the extension of the decree. Yeah. So the decree is only for 3 months and it should not be extended. What would happen there, technically, what they should do is to emit a new project for a decree, to have another consultation, and provide a new decree with but just to summarize, the decree is only viable for 3 months and it could not be extended. Now, regarding the reform that they effectively want to do in the different academic scenario, different guilds and sectors, a modification of the 142 law, it hasn't been presented, the project, but different members have indicated that this is one of the ideas. It's about empowering communities and users, but formally, there's nothing that has been presented to the Congress. Okay, now I'm going to talk a little bit about El Niño phenomenon. So El Niño has this forecast. The last 2 weeks, the probability jumped from 45-50% to 60% by the second half of the year. So the temperature of the Pacific, the Pacific has just, the La Niña has just passed. So the temperature in the Pacific has gone back to its standard, and we're reaching the limit of time where there should be a strong drop. And this has led us to think that we're going to have, by the end of the year, a dry spell. And if El Niño doesn't happen this year, in 2024, we will see El Niño. So yeah, it's a really complicated situation. That's why there's a lot of noise with the stock market prices. We're looking at these signals. We start to save water for that situation, and we want to do save water. Basically, the system just seeks to turn on the thermal generators.
Por los lados de 400 pesos el kilovatio por tasas de cambio, por precios de commodities, por todas estas razones. Y el gas.
So due to the changes of prices of the prices on the market, when 3 years ago the gas powered and the coal power plants had a cost of 200 pesos per watt, now we will be seeing it 400. So saving water is more expensive now than a couple of years ago. So people in the stock market don't really consider this. So they only focus on commodity prices. And also with the policies and the announcement of the government of stopping the gas exploration, because the natural gas portfolio is just dropping in the country. And we're coming to the spring, where the forecasts are not so precise. But between May and June, we will have a clear stance on what the perspective is, or the forecast is.
Bueno, lo primero es que yo ya sí me extrañaba que no fuera a haber bullying en la mesa el día de hoy, pero
Estamos muy juiciosos.
aquí vamos a salir invictos, pero bueno. Sebastián, voy a tratar de tomar tu...
Sebastián, I'll try to address your question in part. And yes, we didn't comply the guidelines. Effectively, we're above the debt. On that, we're still on the metric of leverage that where we wanted, which is 3 times the EBITDA. We're not outside of that, because it's the leverage that we want to have as a business. Second, there's something that is, while it's not in our normal standard, the operations with dollars, which is by the end of the year is 200 billion pesos in change of debt that we had. So it's a term of translating the financial report, but nothing regarding indebtedness. For the rest, we have several projects regarding the platforms and the rate option that we have. The IDB, we already had a lot of cash from there, and we had several projects that we're thinking on bringing once these projects have matured, so that we can validate those platforms. So the idea is we're in a transit period. If we can close the year above what we were expecting, then we will jump into executing projects. So yes, there was a delay on the resources, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to arrive. And it's not structural, it's due to outside factors. Second, where is the debt and who's going to do the reacquisition? The BCA, it's a company that doesn't have indebtedness. Fundamentally, it's backed by an operation on an account payable of the assets that was done in 2017. And from all the flows are in Colombia. In La Colombia, sorry, La Colombia company. So let's say that prepaid a debt, if we want it at the source, it would be in La Colombia, and it would not be a good decision, especially who's paying most of that is La Colombia. And we will be seeing a tax shield that would be enormous. In the SA, where we have a little bit more flexibility,
hemos subido esos recursos, pero la idea es que no sea con endeudamiento para que la SA no cambie su perfil de deuda y no lo hagan tampoco las entidades operacionales. Entonces, digamos que...
So let's say that, in a matter of speaking, we understand that the 16% is there, but it's a conjuncture, and we should go back to normal levels. And if we were to make that decision today, we would be executing a really high cost of acquisition of value of La Colombia, which has been the big part of our debt. So this doesn't mean that our horizons, or we don't have the interest of reducing the debt of the company, the global debt. But as we were mentioning 3 months ago, a very important part of our plan in face of the macroeconomic risks, more than the regulatory risk that we've talked a lot in this session, the macroeconomic risks at a difficult time of no liquidity, what we can have is a debt that has a really long profile so that we can manage and have flexibility. That's why the plan has been more on that hand rather than prepaying the debt. Sebastian, do you have any other question? No, thank you very much. Yeah, no, that's it for now. Thank you for your answers. We have another question. Mauricio Mesa. Go ahead, Mauricio.
Que no sea nuestro director de proyectos, que es su homónimo.
Su homónimo. Este Mesa es con S, el nuestro es con Z. Bueno, Mauricio está ahí.
So, Mauricio, are you there?
No, yo se lo paso. Y te paso el de Andrés.
Mauricio. Bueno, vamos a seguir con otra persona.
Okay, so we're going to continue with Ricardo. Ricardo, go ahead. Ricardo doesn't have a last name on screen. So Ricardo, go ahead. So yeah, I'm Ricardo Sandoval from Bancolombia. Thank you for the session. I had two questions. The first is regarding El Niño that Ricardo just mentioned. And today's the marginal scarcity cost is 200 pesos. And the price on stock is in 442 pesos. Now, in the front of a drought scenario or a opportunity cost for saving water that is high, I would like to know if we will be able, in the regulation fee of the user, duplicates the cost for user. This means whenever there's a scarcity, is it possible that even the rate that you want to reduce will be impacted by that? That's the first question. And maybe you can answer that and then I'll ask the second question. Yeah, no problem, Ricardo. So it's a wonderful question. And what I recommend is everyone who's on Twitter, just recommend following how stock market. There's this great channel that explains the Colombian market. So I'm going to give you a really wonderful answer to the clients of Celsia in El Valle and Tolima. We have a 95% higher. So El Fenómeno El Niño can reach and it will shoot the rates up and our customers are not going to see any difference. But now let's look at the country. So the country as it is, it's hired 80% at a long-term contracts. Those long-term contracts are around 300, between 270 to 300 pesos. So 80% are not going to have an impact. What happened with the rest of the 20%? Let's do that calculation. Let's say it reaches 1,000 pesos. So it's a differential of 700 pesos for the 20%. Yeah. So you have 140 pesos that have more price in the terms of the G. In the, let's say, the worst case scenario of El Niño. But it's also important to point out that in that calculation is going to have an increase of 140 in G, but we're not going to have a restrictions. Due to restriction, it's going to go down to 0. And restrictions of around 30 to 40 pesos. So the net effect is 100 pesos. So 100 pesos, the whole country. But in Valle y el Tolima, there would be no impact. So yeah, the 300 system in the most critical scenario, there would be just an effect of 100 pesos for the duration of the phenomenon. So it's something that's really wonderful that the system has today and the protection that we have with the design of the Colombian electric system. And I want to do a comment that it's really important, which is we're needing energy. There was a bid before the decree of the president. There was a bid that's looking for energy for December 2026. And the CREG is giving an alert because we need the trust of the investors. We need to gain and earn the trust of the investors because we might be running into issues there. Sorry, I ran out of battery in my phone. So we're going to be having this. We will be needing more kilowatts for the Colombian system. So that's something important. So I hope that answers your question, Ricardo. Ricardo, do you have another question, right? Yes. The second question is, can you give me the number of the article of the National Development Plan that affects the tributary benefits in renewable non-conventional sources that you've mentioned. Do you have the number? And I understand that when you look at the whole system, the increment is small, but it will be possibly concentrated in areas that are more affected and that are more exposed to the market prices rather than the contract prices. So from the political point of view, it might be a little bit dangerous, but perfect. Thank you for your answer. Ricardo, it's Article 146 of the National Development Plan that modifies Article 54 of Law 143 of 94. And something important regarding the political aspect is, just like there's 5 in Celsia, there are other expositions, but politically is not what it historically was. So we've seen that on the coast, there was a high contraction. It's not the same as us. So it's not the same exposition to market as it was. And sorry, Ricardo, and what's most important, you're allowing us to talk about a big myth that was there. So if the reservoir is full, then the tariff has to drop. No, it's not like that. It depends on the forecast. And the thing is that saving water and keeping that reservoir full, it's expensive, but that depends on the forecast. But look what happens, because the figure and the data kills the gossip. So once we have that forecast of La Niña, the 75% of the price from stock was under the contract. So you can picture this. The stock market was always below. And now 2 years after, where I think, Esteban, how long were we in 0 pesos in stock? Almost 30%. Yeah, that happens when we have rain spells. And we're in this transition phase that I've told you, it generates a differential prices. Thank you again, Ricardo. We have a specific question on the terms of this year. The participant is 0004328. Now, regarding the terms of 2023, do you have any expectation? Sorry, it's Margarita Navarro. Yeah, as a matter of fact, we refinance, and that figure corresponds to the financial state or to the picture by the end of 2022. As we were mentioning, in January this year, we generate the bonds in circular markets for 240 billions. But out of those 400 billions, 240 were already refinanced in January. And what we're leaving, which is 260 billion, are the normal things that we always expect to have, that we were not, really wanted to reduce the exposition there. And I'm going to go back, if you give me. Look how important it is to save water. Peñol closed the year at 100% capacity as a water reservoir. And we 50 days of the year between, it hasn't really rained a lot, and Peñol is already at 82%. So yeah, yeah, the level goes down and it goes down quick. Okay, Esteban, I'm just summarizing because there are some that what we're trying to do is we can summarize and answer the question. There's no one raising their hand. We already answered the questions from Twitter space, except the open English one that they have a 2-for-1 promotion. Other than that, everything was really wonderful. This was an experiment that we wanted to conduct of using a platform such as Twitter to do retransmission for a financial report. I think that it was really interesting that more than 100 people were logged in for this almost 2 hours. So it's a different way of presenting, but it's a way of communicating and sharing all of our report. Ricardo, if you will, the closing words. Yeah, thank you everyone for being with us. There's a thing of a customer that is not receiving invoicing. So yeah, we will address that with the team. And I would like to thank all of you and give you a message that, as Steven Pinker mentions, let's make it possible that in the face of all this regulatory uncertainty, that we will be able to be resilient, we will be able to adapt, that we can keep a trajectory of stability, of solidity, and that's what we're doing. We're at a stage that it's different, where we have to be really prudent, we have to really control the cost, we have to be really productive, and we have to be really prudent with the new investment. Additionally, we need to continue exploring these new avenues for growth and possibility to develop and enrich and improve the quality of life of our customers. And thank you very much. And hopefully we will meet in the shareholders meeting, which is going to be in May here in Medellin. And hopefully you will be there, or you can join us through the internet. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.